A narrow escape. Leo would never forget his mother's smile. He could conjure it wherever, whenever he wished, even without the memory saved on his watch. He made a point to remember it because it was such a rare thing. You don't remember every brown feathered bird that lights upon the branch of the tree by your room, but you remember the scarlet tanager that perched on your windowsill one gray Sunday morning, flamboyantly fluttering his wings before flying off. His mother's smile was like that, bright and elusive and fleeting, something to be cherished. It wasn't that she was unhappy, at least he never thought so, but Leo's mother lived in the future, her mind always 4 hours away, 3 days down the road, fixated on the years yet to come, always planning, contemplating, fretting, so concerned about what might happen next that she sometimes lost track of what she was doing. Leo would find her standing motionless, a forgotten thing in her hand, a book, maybe, or a spatula, staring off into space as his grilled cheese started to burn. She would get that look in her eye, and Leo would know that she'd gone ahead of herself again. She always worried too much, Dad said after she'd gone, forgetting to open her own presents on Christmas because she was already planning what to buy us for next year. Unlike Father, who often looked on the future with a wide-eyed stare and a boyish grin, Leo's mother met it with frowns and nervously nibbled nails. Dad contemplated the future's rich possibilities. Mom tried to anticipate everything that could go wrong. Both of his parents thought Leo took more after her. But she could only fret over the future. She couldn't see it. If she could, she wouldn't have gone into town with her sister that day. She would have joined Leo and his brother and father down by the beach instead. She would have kept them all together if she had known. Nothing good ever comes from leaving the people you love. Of course, nobody knew what was coming, not the humans, not even the Ikari, who had sworn to protect them, who had defenses in place to repel such an attack. Except those defenses weren't strong enough, not on that day. They were all taken by surprise. Leo remembered his mother smiling at him that morning, getting somehow stuck in the moment long enough to give him that gift along with a hug goodbye. She asked him to bring her back a shell, the prettiest one he could find. He promised her he would. She had long brown hair with light red streaks that stood out in the sun. Her name was Grace. And in that moment, and in all the moments before, she was the center of Leo's universe. Then the missiles struck, and the whole world shook, and that smile was all Leo had left. Leo finally allowed himself one quick glance over his shoulder, all the way down the corridor to turn, just catching a glimpse of the top of Boz's head peeking after him, then turned back to the hangar. The Icarus, halfway across the bay, is peeling yellow paint, standing out against the silvers and grays of the other ships. There were at least a dozen of them, a couple two-seat fighters, some smaller star jumpers, a few freighters the same size as the Icarus. A dozen different ships heading a dozen different places. They couldn't all be pirates. Some of them had to be traders or merchants. Obviously not honest ones if they had come here to do business. But maybe not as dangerous? Maybe not with a price on their heads? Maybe he could bribe someone. A smuggler would recognize a potential payout when she sees it. There had to be some reward of rescuing a coalition vessel and its crew. It might be worth trying. Find another pilot, or even just sneaking aboard, taking his chances with another ship, another crew. After all, it hadn't been that hard the first time. At least until he got caught sitting in the storage compartment that had once held 2 large containers of food. Containers that had been left behind on the Beagle by the worst pirate in the galaxy to ease the conscience that he supposedly didn't have. As Leo scanned the array of unfamiliar-looking ships docked in the hangar, he heard Kat's voice in his head. We can't just leave him here. He won't last a day. Could he, though? Could Leo just leave Bastion Black and his crew after saying he'd help them? They were counting on him to get to the Icarus, to warn Skits, to power up the ship. This Stowaway, this kid they hardly knew. But what reason did he have, really, for keeping his word? Because 2 of the crew were human. Because the alien talked to him and told him about his bathrobe instead of tearing him limb from limb? What would his father expect him to do? He would say the pirates couldn't be trusted. They were just as dangerous to the coalition as the Jarek. And his mother? She would have told him to trust his gut and to do whatever he could to get back to his family. Leo's gut told him that one of these ships was probably piloted by someone who would find it in their heart to help him, but that it was even more likely to be owned by a mercenary who would actually feed him to a snid or sell him off at the next port. His eyes fell back on the Icarus, the only ship in the hangar he recognized. Sometimes it's better to sleep out in the rain. Even Bastion Black, with all his talk, hadn't made good on any of the threats to leave Leo behind. Yet. Leo steeled himself, his mind made up. Except there was a problem. The 2 additional security bots standing by Icarus's loading ramp, rifles slung across their metal chests. Nerds! Leo hissed. Even if the security bots were looking for him specifically, they were clearly watching the ship. He had to get on the Icarus without being seen, or maybe just without being caught. Leo looked at his watch. It was the first rule of magic, the first rule his mother had taught him at least. Always give the audience something else to look at, something to draw their attention away from the real action. Bell Gips! Right, Bell Gips. 10 for 1 pentar. Off to Leo's right stood a Jorl, with its spiky orange head and catfish whiskers, holding up some strange-looking purple fruit about the size of a baseball. He had a whole cart full of them. Leo turned his watch dial to 4, the same recording he used whenever he and Gareth played tag, then changed course, heading for the cart. He'd never stolen anything in his life unless you counted sweets from his own pantry after midnight, but it was only 1 piece of fruit. Besides, the peddler could have his Belgip back as soon as Leo was done with it, provided it was still in 1 piece. He slipped around the back of the carts and pilfered one of the Terraton's goods while its back was turned, cupping the purple globe in his hand. It was heavier than he had expected, its outer rind tough as tree bark. Perfect. His fingers curled around it reflexively, remembering the hours spent tossing baseballs with Gareth in the glow of the street lamps back on Earth, and just as many hours doing the same in the hangar of the Beagle. Gareth always had the stronger arm, but Leo's throws were more accurate. Leo ducked behind a stack of shipping crates with the Belgip's toss of the Icarus's ramp. He only had 1 shot. Leo cocked, aimed, fired. The Belgip pegged one of the security bots in the back of the head, the tough skin of the alien fruit resounding with a hollow gong. Both robots swiveled to see Leo taking off from behind the crates, running at full speed across the hangar bay. They called after him to halt, their voices clearly meant to be the authoritative and intimidating kind, and moved to intercept with their rifles raised. But the boy they were chasing didn't heed their warnings. He just kept running, straight into the hangar wall, at which point he vanished. Poof! The security bots looked around, scanning the hangar. Had they picked that moment to look at the Icarus, they would have seen Leo's real boots disappearing up the ramp. Leo's mother had been the one to teach him how to do magic tricks. It had been a hobby of hers in high school. In fact, it's how she and the future Dr. Calvin Fender had met. He picked a card, and she pulled it out of his ear and wrote her number on it. It was, as both of them remembered fondly, the Jack of Hearts. Leo and his mother would sometimes spend all evening learning new tricks, while his father worked late into the lab and his brother was at practice. The two of them would sit on the porch and make cards levitate, spoons bend, and coins disappear. She was the master, Leo, her struggling apprentice, the thread getting tangled, the coins often slipping between his fingers and bouncing on the floor, the ace of spades never materializing, as it was stuck between somewhere up his sleeve. And when he grew frustrated, which was often, Grace Fender would put her hands on his, calming him. It takes practice, Leo. Don't worry. You'll get it. You're only 7. I didn't start performing magic until I was twice your age. Besides, it isn't supposed to be easy. That's what makes it so special. If anyone could do it, it wouldn't be magic, would it? Along the way, she taught him the rules. Like rule number 2, never divulge how a trick is done. So when Gareth, who was better than Leo at most things, but had no knack for sleight of hand, begged to know how his brother performed each trick, Leo would shrug and say, "Magic, of course," before turning and smiling at his mother, the secret stuck between them. And rule number 3, never perform the same trick for the same audience, because if they know what's coming, there can be no surprise. And the surprise, the revelation, is what gets you. Leo and his mother weren't the only ones who knew that rule. The jar knew all about the element of surprise. The day the missile struck, Leo was distracted by seagulls and darting fish and the feel of wet sand squishing between his toes. The sky was empty. There was no way of knowing that a fleet of Jarrick warships had just come out of their jump in Earth's orbit, arming their ordnance, picking their targets, most of the missiles launching before the Ikari had even had a chance to respond. The devastation was worldwide. So many cities left burning. So many lives lost. The night before the attack, Leo's mother had introduced him to a new trick, seemingly passing a chain of colored scarves through her skull in one ear and out the other. "I'm cleaning my brains," she said. "Just getting the dust out." It was marvelous, just like she was. He begged her to teach him, but it was already too late. "Tomorrow," she said, "I promise." The 4th rule of magic was one he learned the hard way. Always leave your audience wanting more. "Skits," Leo said as loud as he dared, not wanting to be heard from below in the case. Grimsley's mechanical sentries had returned to their post. "Skits, where are you?" The only response was the muffled sound of music coming from the ship's engine compartment, piano and strings, sad and slow. Leo followed the sound, but stopped when the robot's high-pitched voice came belting along the corridor. "And I need you now, tonight," Leo shuddered. He burst into the Icarus's engine room to find Skits with 2 mechanical arms extended from its torso, one holding a torch that was welding 2 pipes together, the other tapping time to the music against her metal torso right above a sticker for Joe's Crab Shack, in perfect imitation of Boz. The music came squeaking out of the speaker somewhere on the robot's midsection, though Leo wondered how in the galaxy she could possibly hear it over her own screeching. "And I need you more than ever." She certainly didn't seem to notice Leo waving his arms and shouting her name from the entry, afraid to get too close to the temperamental robot with a blowtorch in her hand. "Skits! And if you only hold me tonight, tight." "Skits!" Leo shouted, jumping and waving his arms. The robot spun, and the music instantly shutting off. "Gah!" she screamed, her torch flaring, its flaming tongue shooting across the room, nearly singeing Leo's hair. Leo screamed and leaped backward, banging into the wall. "Hey, watch it!" The appendage holding the blowtorch retreated, folding up and back into Skits's metal middle. "What the actual hell?" she said. "Why did you sneak up on me like that? I could have burned your whole ugly human face off. Skits, please. And where's Boz?" she continued, head spinning. "Did something happen? Did you do something to him?" Skits let out an electronic gasp. "Did you kill him? Because if you did, I will have no choice but to annihilate you." The robot advanced a couple of feet. What? No! Would you just shut up and listen? Leo sputtered. Boz is in trouble. He's been trying to contact you. He says it's a code 14. Those apparently were the magic words. No sooner had Leo finished his sentence than something flashed in the robot's oval eyes, and she went tearing down the corridor, knocking Leo into the wall, bouncing off her 3 uneven treads all the way to the cockpit. Leo recovered his balance and ran after her, catching her hovering over the ship's controls. Are you powering up the ship? Because Boz said something about powering up the ship. As if in answer, 2 different claws emerged from the bot's body and danced along the console. He could hear the Icarus's systems coming to life. The cockpit lit up its yellows and blues. In 3 seconds, the robot whirred around and started back down the length of the freighter, heading toward the boarding ramp, knocking even more things over on her way, including Leo again. Wait, where are you going? There are armed security bots down there. I don't care. Bastion's in trouble. Skitz yelled. Leo stared after her. Robots were loyal. They were programmed to be. But he'd never seen any bot act like this before. Skitz careened down the ramp. Leo followed, making it halfway before skidding to a stop. The situation had gotten worse. 2 security bots were now 4, and they had Skitz surrounded, their lasers trained on her. Where's Bastion Black? One of them demanded. In response, Skitz turned her music back on, cranking it up even louder than before. And then she exploded. Maybe exploded wasn't the right word, though there was definitely fire and smoke. Skitz's ever-smiling head spun wildly, and every little hatch and compartment in her body opened at once, revealing at least a dozen arms and extensions of various sizes and types. The blowtorch returned, sprouting torrents of flame. Pointy appendages shot like torpedoes, impaling one of the security bots, though through it exposed the mechanical joints. Thick white plumes of smoke poured from Skitz's backside like a never-ending stream of foggy flatulence. One clawed arm gripped a rifle and wrenched it out of the security bot's hands before it had a chance to fire, while flares shot out of Skitz's head, bursting against the roof of the hangar in a shower of red sparks, and sent the other traders, merchants, and pilots running for cover. It was instant chaos. And through all of it, the music continued to blare. Something oddly appropriate about living in a powder keg, as Skitz bellowed like some wounded animal. I hate you! I hate you all! Die, you hunks of rusty tin! Within a matter of seconds, she somehow had all 4 of the security bots disabled. Her head swiveled back to Leo. See? Now that's how it's The energy blast came out of the smoke, hitting the robot square in the chest. Skitz! Leo yelled as another blast followed, tearing into her treads. The music stuttered, flared once, then vanished. A thick black plume billowed from her torso. Leo peered through the haze to see 6 more security bots advancing on the Icarus, weapons at the ready. Grimsley must have sent everything he had, maybe even borrowed some mechanical muscle from someone else. One of the sentries raised its rifle, advancing toward Leo, who stood paralyzed on the ramp, his legs refusing to work. Move, he told himself, but he couldn't. He found himself back on the bench, staring up at the sky, at another black cloud of smoke, frozen, even as the foremost guard trained the muzzle of his weapon on him, ready to pull the trigger. But not before its own head shattered, bursting into 1,000 little metal shards. Another blast sent a second robot spinning. The remaining 4 turned just in time to see a giant Quilleti emerge from the smoke, hair rippling, robe flapping. With all 4 hands, he grabbed the nearest robot, lifting it clear off the ground before spinning and smashing it into 2 of its friends. The robot turned to fire, but didn't get a shot off because its head was struck by a mechanical fist attached to a mechanical arm attached to a very determined-looking pirate in a smart black uniform. And bringing up the rear was Boz, both pistols in hand, running and twisting to fire behind him, back at the hangar doors. Definitely outstayed our welcome, Baz shouted. More energy bolts filled the hangar. reinforcements firing blindly into the smoke that still continued to pour out of Skitz's damaged body. "What are you doing, Skitz? Let's move!" "She's got a busted tread," Boo shouted back. The Quillette had come up behind the robot, putting all four gorilla-like hands against Skitz's frame, pushing with all of his considerable strength. Her right tread was grinding and sparking, refusing to turn. She started to go in circles. In a heartbeat, the captain was next to Boo, both of them driving their shoulder into Skitz, barely getting her to move forward. Cat dropped in beside them, firing back over her shoulder at the fresh wave of security bots taking over the entrance. Leo looked behind him into the belly of the Icarus, then back at the three pirates pushing their broken companion into the waiting yellow ship. Find somewhere safe and hunker down. Things could get messy. Things had definitely gotten messy. Laser fire tore through the hangar. The robot was barely budging. Leo knew what he was told to do. He could hear the voice in his head. He listened to his gut instead. "Nerds," he hissed again, his boots thudding back down the ramp. Leo squeezed in between the captain and the Quillette, ignoring their questioning looks as he put both hands on Skitz's heated torso, digging in with his heels as best as he could. Finally, something snapped loose or clicked into place because Skitz's right tread started to move again, catapulting her forward and up the ramp. Leo felt a hand on his own back as Baz gave him a push as well. Cat bolted ahead for the cockpit, with the captain right behind her, Boo turning and hitting the switch on the ramp just as the posse of robotic guards started to close in. "Hold on to something," Baz called over the ship's comms. "This is going to be rough." Leo toppled sideways as the Icarus lifted off. He could feel the slight shudder of rifle shots hitting the hull as he stumbled through the ship to the cockpit, finding Baz in the pilot's seat, Cat next to him, both of them cursing under their breaths. Outside the cockpit window, Leo caught the slight shimmering blue of the electromagnetic field that maintained the artificial atmosphere, while allowing solid objects such as the Icarus to pass through unharmed. Just beyond, however, the titanium hangar bay doors were starting to close, like a pair of jaws clamping shut. No solid object was getting through those. Leo said. "I know," Baz muttered. "But I know!" Leo felt his stomach clench as Baz leaned on the ship's accelerator, launching the Icarus across the hangar toward the ever-narrowing gate. Rubbing against a couple of other ships along the way, giving off sparks. "We're not going to make it," Leo thought. He closed his eyes. He heard the scrape of metal on metal as his head banged hard against the console behind and beside him. He thought of his brother and his father. He thought of seashells and snow-covered mountains and the way the pond behind his house would glitter in the sunlight. He recalled his mother's smile, and then he heard Captain Bastian Black holler as Icarus squeezed between the closing metal doors, shooting out into the suddenly beautiful black blanket studded with unknown stars. And so, in committing this act of terror, the Jarg have left us with no option but to defend ourselves, to defend our planet, and to seek justice for thousands upon thousands who were lost. So, it is the United Peoples of Earth do hereby join with the coalition of planets in declaring war on the Jarg Empire and its allies. Menon Araya, Secretary General of the UPE, 2050.